Okay, so welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And this week we have the next in our series of recovery stories and lessons people have learnt on the path to recovery. And one of the things that I like to do with these is to have a kind of broad range of people with different experiences, different backgrounds, different ages, different stages at the kind of journey of which they're talking. And for today's interview, I'm talking with Paddy. Paddy's in the kind of later to, I think, probably final stages of the recovery path. And we'll talk about the things that were influential in Paddy first getting sick, the things that have helped him along the way, and some of the key lessons and reflections looking back from this point. We are obviously, people will know who are watching live on Facebook at the moment. So if you do want to put comments or questions underneath the video, we will have a little bit of time towards the end where I'll attempt, if my technical abilities allow us to do so, to look at some of those questions and put them to Paddy as well. We will probably go for around 25 to 30 minutes or so. We'll see kind of what questions are and what the flow is. But yeah, firstly, Paddy, thank you very much for joining us.
No worries. It's an absolute pleasure.
Great. So probably the best starting point is, at what point did you first start to get symptoms, start to get a sense that just like something wasn't right? Where did your journey with ME chronic fatigue begin?
Sure. So I'd say for me, in hindsight, it was probably about 4 years ago now. So I was in my second year of university and I was finding that throughout that year, I was getting more sick more often. Everything under the sun, I would just catch, it didn't matter whether it's flu, cold, infections, I'd just be getting it all the time. And the more that I'd be getting those infections and illnesses, the longer it would actually take me to recover. So I think that was the first warning sign. But later down the road, in the following year of university, it was obviously a busy year. As many of you know who have been to uni, dissertation time is stressful. There's no way around that.
Yep.
And aside from the high stress, I was also doing a lot of physical exercise, a lot of socializing, and basically trying to cram as much into the space of a year as possible. But I was finding as a result of that, and on the side of that as well, I was getting just increasingly a sense that things weren't quite right with my body. Kind of halfway through the year, I went to my GP and just said, look, I just feel really lethargic the whole time. I'm not really sure why. Obviously, as GPs tend to do, because they don't really have much time to kind of look into things too much further, he basically said, come back once the stress has been resolved and see how you feel. That happened kind of 2 or 3 times until a period in the summer where I was able to kind of convince them to start looking into things further. And that summer, that was when I got a real sense that things were really badly wrong. I was on a family holiday, and the first major, I think, crash for me was where I went on a family bike ride and found that halfway through that bike ride, I was just feeling really depleted and exhausted. And by the end of the day, I physically couldn't move. And that's kind of stayed the case for about 2 weeks straight. I was just bedbound on this family holiday in the summer.
Wow.
Ability to do next to nothing for myself.
And in that period leading up to that, where you were kind of increasingly getting, I guess, signs of depletion and weakness and kind of going down with things, did you have a way of explaining that to yourself? Did it feel like that was, were you wondering what was happening and thinking you just had to push through it? Was it, what was that bit like?
Yeah, I think, when we look at the different subtypes of people psychologically that fall into ME, which has been a real help of the 90-day program. I'll talk more about that later. But for me, I found that I really related with the achiever type, where I sometimes end up being a bit of a people pleaser. And I think that the way in which I get people to respect me the most is by doing as much as humanly possible, and sometimes even more than that. Okay. For me, actually having those kind of symptoms, I was having this internal conflict where I felt like, something was wrong, but it felt like me just being weak or lazy, and that, anyone else suffering from this kind of, period of lethargy would just probably push through. So that's what I did. But obviously, as we know with ME, the more I pushed through, the worse it got.
Sure. And it's a difficult thing, right? Particularly when you're kind of a bit, younger, and it's like your self-worth and your identity is defined by what you do and what you achieve. And I think particularly as a guy, it's like friendship is born through the activities that you can do together. And if you can't do those activities, then you don't have that sense of self-worth and connection that is obviously, crucially important. So you got to this point, you were on this family holiday, you did the bike ride, and then you were completely crashed out for 2 weeks. That must have obviously been pretty scary in terms of what was happening. What was the next step from there?
So the next step from there was probably another 6 months of investigation for every condition under the sun. So I saw, endocrinologists, I saw dietitians, I saw people who would check, my gut, people would check my hormone levels, people who would check my blood sugar levels. And obviously after about 6 months of that, nothing came up. Everything was done to kind of prove that it could be something or it could be something else. But everyone was completely stumped as to why I was just feeling as bad as I was. And finally, after that period of time, I saw one more gastroenterologist who basically said, well, I don't know why it's not obvious to everyone else that this is chronic fatigue syndrome. This is like very typical for what people with chronic fatigue syndrome would suffer from. This is the kind of symptoms that they would express, really.
What was it like to get that diagnosis?
I think very mixed in a way. In a way, I've been aware of chronic fatigue syndrome as a potential condition in the background since, as you do when no one's providing you answers, I was doing my own research as well. And I was really dreading that answer, knowing that as it stands at the moment, no one really knows how to progress with it. So when I heard the news, I was both relieved in the sense that I had a label to put on how I was feeling, and I was convinced that I wasn't going crazy, despite the fact that everyone else seemed to be trying to convince me that I was. But on the flip side of that was also knowing, what do I do from here? And unfortunately, because of the way in which we don't kind of have, a set kind of treatment plan, that is as like a one size fits all solution, certainly within the kind of public healthcare sector at the moment. I was just given a leaflet and told to go and look at a website and do some more exercise as basically, my recommended treatment plan. Which was quite insulting, I think.
Well, it's both insulting, but it's also somewhat terrifying, right? When you know that is categorically not going to work, and that's the best that you're being offered.
Of course, and to receive kind of medical advice from an expert that basically told me that pushing through was a good thing when I'd already learned that was just making me worse was, I don't know, I just felt very lost at that point, and I felt quite abandoned and kind of dismissed by the people that I relied on to try and help me through this.
So how did things progress from there? I guess kind of somewhat terrifying and isolating. What were your next paths from there?
So my next path was very luckily by coincidence. My mum knew a friend who had actually come to the Optimum Health Clinic, and their son or daughter, I think it was, basically managed to find great improvements through actually doing the 90-day program and kind of through continually seeking support from the clinic. And so I thought, actually I'm going to kind of let go of all my kind of predispositions to trying to find out exactly what is wrong and just try and find out how I start making a recovery, because ultimately at that point, I just wanted to make progress. I refused to accept that I was going to be stuck in this situation forever, and I wanted to try and do something to get myself out of the situation.
Were you skeptical about something that was kind of, certainly with a 90-day program, being on the psychology side of what we do? Was there a certain kind of resistance to, clearly I have this very physical thing, why am I looking at this thing from a kind of psychology lens as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I think because the 90-day program kind of flipped everything that I had in my head around, how the treatment for this condition would work, and kind of redefined my ideas around modern medicine. Initially, I was quite skeptical about it because I didn't really understand how that could really be the case, how psychology could so strongly affect physical symptoms as well. And after actually giving a lecture from the lightning process again, I just felt a little bit uneasy knowing that the attitude that the lightning process took was that if things aren't working for you, it's because you're not working hard enough. So I was kind of scared of that attitude of, if it's not working, then maybe it's because I'm doing something wrong rather than because it just doesn't work. But actually I found that the support that I got through the 90-day program and the kind of way in which, the psychology treatment is really catered for the individual was really, really helpful for me.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one in a sense where, and it's, the lightning process certainly is, that's, one place that perspective comes. And I think it's similar to, I think, a lot of approaches that can be that when things are looked at from the lens that this is the answer to what's happening, that then when it's not working, it must be the fault of the client. And I think that when a therapeutic intervention isn't working, you're going to blame one of three things, right? You're either going to blame the methodology, or you're going to blame the practitioner applying the methodology, or you're going to blame yourself as the person which is using it. And when people come away from a therapeutic approach and they blame themselves for something not working, they're actually worse off than they were at the start, because at the start they had this condition or this illness. Now they've got that, and then the idea that it's their fault that they haven't recovered. And it's much better, much healthier for somebody to blame the practitioner or blame the methodology than it is to blame themselves. And quite honestly, if someone is sincere in their practice of something and it isn't helping them, then they're probably right to blame the practitioner or the methodology. So it makes sense that you came into the 90-day program with a certain amount of caution, let's say. How did things evolve from there? So you came and did the kind of three afternoons in person, and then continued through the program. So what happened from there?
So I think I found my life really just starting to turn around. Maybe not so much in terms of my recovery. I think that's taken a little bit longer, but certainly in terms of my general kind of lifestyle, it changed quite dramatically as a result of that program. Really understanding that actually the levels of stress that I was experiencing on a daily basis were not normal was simply a big step in itself. It kind of redefined how I should be going about living my life in a really positive way, because it taught me that actually, part of the reason why I do feel so exhausted all the time, although obviously there's other things going on in the background as well, is because I'm just stuck in this constant fight or flight cycle the whole time. And when I'm kind of at an 8 out of 10 stress level, and I'm pushed kind of 10 and above, obviously my body's going to fight back against that to try and get me to calm back down again. So actually finding tools and techniques to be able to manage that cycle and be able to actually get myself down to a healthier baseline meant that I made real progress with, moving forward in my recovery and actually knowing how I could start to heal myself and how I could allow my body the space and the kind of mental time that it needed to be able to start doing things for me rather than me kind of abusing my body, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And was it immediate? It sounds like psycho-emotionally that there was some fairly immediate recognition in terms of making sense of where you were and why you were where you were, kind of thing. But in terms of applying what you're learning, was it a fairly immediate impact in terms of your body, or was it a more gradual build in terms of the changes?
I definitely say it was a more gradual build. I think as I started applying the techniques to my life, I found that, my symptoms were little by little improving. And I think actually for me, it's been the case that even after the 90-day program, I still needed to have occasional psychological support as well to kind of maintain that. Because whilst I've been able to take those kind of lessons away, it has been also extremely valuable for me to continue having those check-ins and to just make sure that I'm continuing on the right path. And obviously those check-ins have also meant that I've just allowed myself more time and more space to be able to continue to make those gradual improvements to a point where, today we're talking from a perspective where I'm almost at the end of that journey, and, I'm really happy to be at that point.
Sure. And was there, at what point, because I think you did some work on the nutrition side as well in terms of figuring out what was happening on that piece. So just talk us through how that was. And again, was that something that you came to kind of familiar and open to, or was there a sense of really you want me to look at what I eat, and why is that going to be important? What was your perspective around that?
Yeah, so I guess before I came to the clinic, I had heard a lot of talk around the impact of nutrition on ME symptoms before, so it wasn't something that I was entirely alien to. And I think for me personally, I was more open to kind of the nutritional side of things than I was to the psychological side of things. Because for me, having a physical ailment and having kind of physical symptoms, it made sense that what I'm fueling my body with physically would kind of impact that either positively or negatively. So I think I came in with maybe less skepticism into the nutrition side than I did to the psychology side. So I think the journey for me, it started with kind of cutting out a few things. So first it was kind of caffeine and dairy, and then talking about kind of cutting out gluten as well, and also then kind of just rebalancing the way in which I do my meals, and actually including a lot more fresh fruit and vegetables, and making sure that actually I'm getting all the nutrients I need, rather than basically just eating what I want. I thought I had a pretty good diet before I started seeking the nutritional support, but I really found that actually the way in which I was eating on a regular basis was just not helping my body, in any way to be able to start that healing process.
And in terms of the kind of more functional medicine approach, in terms of testing and discovering things that were happening, were there any pieces that were important in terms of actual underlying explanations of why you were having the symptoms that you were having?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one for me was that I had a test to test my mitochondrial function. And that revealed that actually my mitochondrial function and the production of ATP within my body was extremely inefficient. And when I kind of spoke and reviewed that with Emma, the nutritionist I'm seeing at the moment afterwards, basically she said it's no wonder that you're tired, because this is like clearly quite a big issue. If your body can't basically produce enough energy on a cellular level, then of course you're always going to be running on empty if you do a certain amount of overexertion.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what it was like to get that clarity, because often I think one of the things that can be so challenging is it's the kind of, to the medical world, ME chronic fatigue being a medically unexplained illness, and all of the cultural perspectives and ideas that come from the fact that there's no diagnostic marker, like there's no kind of test that you have that you says you have ME chronic fatigue. It's a kind of diagnosis of exclusion. And I think often it can be quite impactful and a significant relief. It's kind of odd where people are happy to get a medical test result that comes back failed, kind of thing. It's like an odd life experience, right? And normally one has a blood test and just is like really hopeful that it's going to come back as being normal. But somehow having explanation of why one's feeling the way that they're feeling. And I wonder what it was like as you started to get, either through the mitochondrial testing or other things that you did, you started to get explanations what that was like in terms of how you felt about things.
It was absolutely as you described it. It was this kind of weird mix between euphoria and obviously kind of, no, well, there we go. That's not so good. So yeah, I think for me it was quite a powerful moment, because it really solidified in my mind, now we know what the issue is. We can actually have, a really solid game plan going forward to really push, to this final stage of recovery. And so now, as a result of that, my nutritional plan has been catered towards actually trying to remedy that issue. Whereas before it was kind of trying to focus on a lot of things at once to try and eliminate, any kind of possibilities. So things like, post-viral infections, as well as gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance, all those kind of things. I'm still, adding support for those things to lighten the load on my body, to make sure that it's still in a place where it has an easiest time as possible. But now actually focusing on a specific problem with a kind of catered solution, in my mind, it felt fantastic, because it was like, now I really see the light at the end of the tunnel, knowing that we have a way to actually fix this.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And as you were then kind of applying the tools you were learning as part of the 90-day program, you were doing work on the kind of more functional medicine, nutrition side. What was the point where you started to feel like you could see like a real change in how you were actually feeling physically? Because it's one thing to kind of have clarity, to have kind of a method, to have a path forward. But obviously the kind of the thing that ultimately matters is what impact it has. And I'm wondering how you knew that what you were doing was showing real signs of working.
Yeah, so I think for me, just a month into this nutritional plan, which included things like D-ribose to supplement the lack of ATP, and then as well as kind of mitochondrial supplements to start rebuilding that kind of cell membrane again, and rebuilding the kind of cell structure within my body to kind of work for me a little bit better. I found that a month into that program, I was already seeing the benefits, where I'd be able to kind of, over the summer, go out swimming quite regularly. And I'd also be able to start doing things like bike rides every so often, which before I'd been terrified of, especially considering that a bike ride was the thing that kind of highlights to me in the first place that something was wrong. As well as kind of doing a little bit more hiking. And then kind of I saw even more kind of dramatic improvements after that. So we had a period at work where there was a lot of demand on, a lot of stress, and we ended up all working kind of 12-hour days plus meals out in the evening as well. So in total, we were up for like, you know, nearly 20 hours, which was crazy for anyone, but especially for someone with ME. And you know what, I felt tired by the end of the week, but at no one point did I actually properly crash, which was a real first, considering when I first started this journey, I'd be crashing every day at work after about 2 hours. That would be kind of me done, and I'd need a coffee or just anything to kind of keep me going. But I think the most dramatic moment of all, and the moment why I think, you know, we're having this interview today, and, you know, what marks a real landmark for me is I actually, a few weeks ago, agreed with my friend to go climb Ben Nevis, which is, you know, a real physical challenge. And my fitness isn't great, obviously, from not being able to do exercise in that kind of intensity for quite a while now. But, you know, despite the fact that I took a few breaks all the way up, we made it all the way up and all the way down, and we're out for kind of, you know, 10 hours in the end hiking. And it was quite hard going, but at no point again did I actually crash at any point all the way up. Obviously there's a little bit of payback afterwards because it was, you know, a lot very soon. But, you know, I would have never dreamed of being able to do that at all in a million years. If you'd have asked me whether I could do that or not 2 years ago, it would have been completely out of the question. I would have been terrified.
And what was there a moment on that hike that it kind of hit you, you know, that you were like, oh my God, like I'm doing this? And because I think for a lot of people watching this, there's that people dream of being able to, you know, do those kind of physical challenges. And yeah, I'm just curious as to what the kind of emotional impact was of being able to, you know, after a number of years, be able to go and do something like that.
It was honestly like complete euphoria. It was fantastic. You know, I kind of, we kind of in the first couple of hours really hit a tough spot where we were like going up a very hard incline for, you know, quite a long period of time. And, you know, we were both a little bit shattered by the end of that already, and we had a fair way to go. But rather in my mind than going, you know, I'm too afraid to continue moving on, it was for the first time in a long time, you know what, I can do this. I believe I can do this. And I'm keeping up with my friend who's a lot fitter than me and has no health issues whatsoever. And that was amazing. It was just amazing to feel like I was finally living somewhat of a more normal life again, and to have that freedom to be able to do the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's a kind of, it's almost like a kind of feeling of, you know, and it sounds like it's the chapter that you're in and you're still in that chapter, but it's kind of like that chapter of almost doing everything for the first time again, like being able to go and do a big physical challenge, being able to go and, you know, do a kind of big work challenge, being able to, you know, go off and have like, you know, adventures on holidays or kind of with friends. And there's something that it's almost like the experience of being reborn, like kind of coming back into the world. And it's almost like the most simple, basic things start to feel so magical and so kind of amazing, because there's that kind of realization that you haven't been able to do those things for a sustained period of time. And I guess that leads me on to, and also just people watching, if people, they want to post questions, we'll take a few questions in a little bit as well. So feel free to post questions after the video, but under the video. But as you look back on, this kind of experience, you know, while still coming through those kind of later stages, as you look back, what are some of the key lessons? Like, what are the things that you realize were particularly important for you as part of your recovery process?
So I think a big one for me, and it's something that I still am learning on a daily basis, is that no matter what people think, your personal well-being is more important. You know, I think for me a big thing was losing these predispositions of thinking that having this illness made me weak, and it made me kind of not able to do things in a more normal way, and not accepting that, and moving into a space of being like, you know what, I have these limitations and that's okay, and people won't judge me for that, because I'm, you know, now completely open and honest about, you know, what I can and can't do, and people actually respect the fact now that I say, you know, when I'm feeling bad and that I just need to rest, rather than, you know, before what I was trying to do is I just kind of try and push through, burn myself out constantly, then make myself even more unhelpful because I was out for a longer period of time. So I think lesson one is, you know, you are the most important person in your life ultimately, and you are the one that needs to look after yourself. You don't need to look after other people or put other people first when you're going through something, you know, as kind of debilitating as ME. You really need to look out for number one more often.
It's kind of that analogy of the being on an aeroplane and suddenly, you know, it kind of starts nosediving, the oxygen masks come out, and the kind of parent being so attentive to wanting to support their children that they're trying to put their oxygen masks on and they pass out through lack of oxygen. And it's that remembering that you have to put your own mask on first, even though intuitively your kind of temptation might be to be there and do things for others, that we ultimately have to take care of ourselves to then be able to be there for others. Yeah, what else? And, you know, another way of kind of looking at the question as well is that if you were giving advice to you kind of 2-3 years ago, what would be the things that you would want you to know?
So I think advice I give myself as well would be listen to your body. Don't try and fight it. And again, I think that's related to, you know, trying to push through for the sake of other people. It's just kind of actually, you know, if my body's telling me that something is wrong, actually listening to it and going, okay, what do I need to do to, you know, make my body kind of feel safe again, really? Because that's been a key thing in kind of in the relapses that I have suffered, is I haven't been listening to my body, and I've kind of suffered the consequences of that. And I now find that when I kind of meditate and I get more in tune with my body and have that space to really know what's going on, then I know exactly what I need to do and how I need to pace myself according to how I feel on a day-by-day basis.
And I think that's, you know, particularly when one's an achiever and a doer and one that kind of defines themselves by what they accomplish in the world, it's knowing those limitations at that, particularly as you're kind of, you know, coming through the recovery path, and having the courage to express those. And then on the other side of recovery, it's not living a life which is ultimately a cautious, protected life where the whole time we're worried about kind of relapsing. It's living ultimately living a completely full, alive, you know, in the world life, and being in touch with and knowing one's needs and being able to express those. And even, you know, when it might not be seen as being kind of, you know, cool or kind of whatever, to kind of say, actually, this is what I need, and to have the self-awareness to know that. Yeah. And anything else that comes to mind as you think about kind of lessons as you reflect back?
And I think definitely related to what you just said, you know, another lesson I kind of take into account is vulnerability is okay. And actually it's okay to need support from people. I think, you know, having that kind of achiever personality meant that I felt that not only did I have to push through things, but that I needed to solve these problems myself. And when I couldn't solve them, I didn't know what to do. And so having now a great support network where I can actually admit to my friends, you know what, actually things aren't great at the moment. And I just really would appreciate, you know, someone to call, or just, you know, someone to come and, you know, come around and just keep me company. You know, that's been a big shift in my mindset, and it's made a massive difference, because I'm now in a place where I don't feel like I'm on my own with this. And I know that there's people that I can count on to help me through this time, you know, for however much longer it lasts.
Yeah. And it's a big thing, I think, particularly for guys, to say, what I need is you just to come and hang out with me. Right. It's like, it's a kind of, to have contact, which is not about doing or activity or kind of outcome, but is actually just about kind of someone being there. And it's, I think for anyone, kind of contact like that's important, but to actually be able to ask for it can be a challenge. And I think often our fear of what we think is going to happen if someone says no is rarely as bad, you know, as we, you know, our expectation is rarely how it goes. And even if someone does say no, it's like, it's often less painful than not asking in the first place, where we reject ourselves. And it's like, we ask something and we don't get it. We still feel a sense of opening and a sense of kind of saying yes to ourselves, even if we haven't in that instance got the thing that we wanted. So what does the future look like? When you look towards the next kind of, you know, 6 months, when you look forward to the next kind of year or two? Sorry, my wife is trying to. When you look forward to the next I'm just going to block calls coming, otherwise no doubt she'll try again in a second.
No worries.
Yeah, when you think towards the next chapters, what are you looking forward to, and how does it feel?
Yeah, so I think, if you'd have asked me that question at the beginning of my journey, I would have said, I want to be living and doing all the things that I used to do. I want to be going to the gym, 4 or 5 times a week. I want to be, the best at what I do at work. I want to be, having an amazing social life. But you know what, now that I've been through this journey and I've been able to change my mindset along the way and just appreciating the smaller things, what I really am looking forward to is having a life where I have more physical freedom to be able to do things, and actually have a sensible balance in my life now, actually being able to approach activities in a way where mentally it's a lot more healthy for me, and physically I'm not kind of overstretching myself even if I am fully recovered. Just being in that space where I have the freedom to do what I want to do, but in a mindset and with a kind of attitude that is so much healthier than it would have been before I was ill. And weirdly, I think I never would have thought I'd catch myself saying this, and to a lot of people on this kind of live call, it probably sounds quite alien right now as well, but I think in many ways I'm actually glad that I got ME, because it really kind of was the thing that I needed to reevaluate my priorities in life and to give me new perspective on the things that I'd just taken for granted before.
Yeah, it's one of those comments which feels so true when you're coming through the other side, and feels so not true when you're in the midst of it. And in a sense, it's like one of the ways that one knows that they're kind of coming to the kind of later stages, and that they're kind of emotionally kind of digesting and processing things, as you can feel that gratitude and that appreciation, and that kind of value of the experience. Even if the experience has been a very difficult one, there can still be that value in it. Perhaps final question. I'm just mindful of time here, but final question in terms of if you were to sit down with you at the point that you were at your most bleak in terms of things, and maybe that was after that 2-week bike ride and holiday, maybe it was a bit further down the path, and when your kind of mindset might have been, am I ever going to recover? Will I ever get out of this? What would you say to you in that moment?
I think it'd be quite simple. It'd be the one sentence: mindset changes everything. That's a lesson that I've learned so much throughout my recovery journey so far. Whenever I look at things from the perspective of, will I ever get better? Why am I going through this? I feel awful. Why is no one else kind of able to appreciate how difficult this is? Things get worse, because physically I feel worse because my mind is telling my body, just to accept the situation I'm in, to kind of, feel vulnerable and to feel weak. But when I change my mindset to, I'm in this situation now, but I won't be in this situation forever. And there are things that I can do, even if it's slightly limited, to be able to enjoy my life to whatever extent I'm able to physically enjoy my life. And even if I can't physically do much today, that's okay. I can do something to work on my mental health. I can do something to kind of make my life fulfilling in some way. That has been a crucially important part of my recovery, is kind of changing from a mindset of everything is terrible, this is so unfair, to actually things will get better and there are things that I can enjoy even now.
And I think it's such an interesting point that mindset is everything, even when you're suffering from a physical illness, because it's not that you change your mindset and miraculously everything changes physically. There's still the kind of practical steps of addressing the mitochondria and the kind of physical impacts that are happening. But it's cultivating that mindset that allows you to do that in a way which is consistent and determined and patient and all of those things. So anything else that you want to add before we finish, Paddy?
Absolutely, yes. So I think the last things that I would add is, for me personally, I've only been able to really learn all of these lessons by making sure to do daily practices that allow me to have the space that I need to be able to understand how I'm feeling at any one time. So that includes things like yoga, meditation, journaling. And, all those things seemed like things to me that initially would require a lot of time and effort, but they only really take a few minutes out of my day, and they make all of the difference for me to be able to acknowledge, exactly how I'm feeling on a day-by-day basis, and to keep, my stress levels under control, and to respond appropriately to, how I'm feeling at any one day, and to be able to kind of work with that and address the pacing as such that it kind of suits my needs at the time.
Fantastic. And of course, it's going back to your previous point, it's the mindset that allows one to be consistent with those practices. It's like knowing what to do is only part of it, right? It's doing what you know to do is often the challenge. And that again, it comes back to mindset. So Paddy, thank you very much for sharing your story. For people watching, we are working on the plan for next year in terms of Facebook Lives. We're going to have the plan is a monthly nutrition session as part of the Facebook Lives of the nutrition team, hopefully a monthly recovery story, and then we'll have some of the usual sessions that I've been doing as well. So I imagine there'll be a session next week, possibly the week after, we'll see. And yeah, thank you again, Paddy, for sharing your story. And thank you everyone for watching, and bye-bye for now.